he is being talked about as he's this year's, generational running back. So first of all, how generational are we talking here? Because that, that word has started to get pretty, you're pretty numb to that word these days, right? Every year there's somebody that's generational.
Yes. No, and to me, a generation is like a football career. It's like 8 years.
Okay.
Every 8 years in the NFL, you have a completely new group of NFL players. Now you get some holdovers at quarterback, offensive line, but running back, if you have an 8-year career at running back,
you're doing well.
That's it. So that's a generation in the NFL. So that's also the span of the PFF college era, basically. We've done 9 years of grading college football. I would put Bijan Robinson personally as the best running back of that time span, just in terms of projection to the NFL. I thought Saquon's running style had a little too many worries, in my opinion, when projecting the league. Obviously, a fantastic athlete all around, no questions about that. But, he was a home run play merchant. He was the guy bouncing outside. He'd stop his feet behind the line of scrimmage. He wasn't as decisive as I see Bijan Robinson on tape. And then Robinson's, there in that realm athletically. I'm not sure if he's going to test as off the charts as Saquon, but you don't need to be an elite running back at the NFL. He has very high-end tools. So
that would be my first question. If he's the best running back during the PFF era, since we've been grading college football, who was that before this year? Who was the previous best running back you've seen come out?
That's tough. Now, I didn't love Leonard Fournette. Obviously, he was the second highest drafted. So Saquon was the highest drafted too. Leonard 4, Zeke 4. And Zeke was just very good, very sound. Zeke was that guy who was maybe not the anti-Saquon Barkley, but all the things that you kind of knock Saquon Barkley for, Zeke did already. Yeah. Zeke's this guy is NFL built all over him. He gets upfield, he can pass protect, he can do all the little things. But I'll trend more towards the guy who's probably just a dynamic athlete. So love Saquon, love Dalvin Cook, obviously coming out, but he has other issues. But I'd probably have said Saquon was probably the best in the PFF era before.
Do you have a comp for Bijan?
Oh, not a good one. Nothing I loved. I could look real quick who I put in the draft guide. But
so when I was watching his tape, he kind of struck me as a little bit of what you're saying before, that everything he does, he makes look really easy. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't necessarily look like he's, going 100%, but it just works. And that reminded me a lot of the kind of style is a lot of how Christian McCaffrey did really well. But yeah. Christian McCaffrey's a good athlete with the exception of his 3-cone, which is mind-blowingly insane. But everything else, he's a good athlete. But what if you took that and made it, had the same style from a great athlete? That kind of is where I'm feeling with Bijan Robinson at the moment.
All right. I put Edgerrin James.
Okay.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
So the do-it-all backs that were the rage in the 2000s. Where there's Edge, LT. That's the mold. That's the mold.
LT isn't a bad comp either, actually.
I mean, that's those guys were all very similar.
Yeah, and he had a similar style of it didn't look difficult. He just made those things look easy. I think my comp for McCaffrey when he was coming out was Priest Holmes, which again, when he was at his peak was absurd.
Yeah.
They're all in that kind of similar mold of they just make this kind of thing look simple, and a lot of it is the vision and always being in the right place. And there are a lot of runs he makes where you can see the cut he's going to make, but he somehow makes it better and then gets through a gap better than other people making the same cut. It's just his ability to actually succeed doing those things is insane.
It's just smooth.
Yeah. So if he's the best running back to come along, Saquon was probably the one before that. Those are I think you've mentioned the guys that are in that conversation, right? Saquon, Leonard Fournette, depending on how you liked him, Christian McCaffrey, Zeke, Bijan is now number one in that category. The real question becomes, knowing what we know about team building, about running back data, PFF, how dependent running backs are and everything else, all those kind of things, right? Then all the way to the extreme of running backs don't matter, blah, blah, blah. How high do you take a guy like that? And this is not how high should the NFL take it. How high, if you GM Michael, how high does GM Michael draft Bijan?
So this is set the stage a little before I say where I draft him. But there's a few things at play here, right? One is the positional value, just how much he's going to impact the field. We've seen, I think the Chiefs learned this, where it's draft a running back, you think it's this icing on the cake, the last piece of the puzzle, cherry on top, whatever. But truth is, the best teams in the NFL don't want to take the ball out of the hands of their quarterback, right? They want to pass. You want to be able to run the ball, but truthfully, you don't want, the offense to revolve around Derrick Henry. You don't those guys get you only so far. You want to win through the air. That's how you do it. And as good as you can be as a receiver running back, you're probably still going to be like an average wide receiver. There's few guys who are actually running backs that could have been, Chris McCaffrey's probably like one of the few, and that's why the 49ers paid the premium, where it's like this guy can actually just split out wide and be a receiver and cool, and then make an impact there. So I wouldn't, Bijan at 220, is he ever going to be that as a receiver? Probably not. So to join the elite, to be among the elite, you just want to pass, and that inherently devalues the running back position. And then the other point I said was, if you play 8 years at the running back position, that's a career. Like, that's a long career in the NFL. Whereas if you draft other, say, lower value positions, guard, tight end, those guys 12 or 13 years is what you're expecting out of it. Like, that can be a cornerstone, especially offensive line, where if you get a Jason Kelce, if you get a guy who's like a stalwart at guard, they're there for 15 years, and they're also relatively, like, they take pay cuts. Like, they like, to the hometown discount, a lot of guys taking those are the guys who aren't complaining about their contracts, tend to be along the offensive line for whatever reason it is. Like, you don't see a lot of O-line holdouts. That's just not a thing. So those two issues aside, I think Bijan Robinson is still good enough that I'd go as high in this draft, because it always, depends on the other talent that you could get.
And that's an important point. Like, everyone always talks about, like, never take a running higher than whatever point.
Yes.
It always depends what else is available. And actually, specifically with running backs in the first round, I think that may actually be the most important thing. It's the opportunity cost of what you could be potentially passing up the higher up the draft you go.
I would go as high as 18 to the Detroit Lions.
Okay. I think that's reasonable.
Because to me, to draft a running back that highly, I have to have a very good offensive line also. I don't care about the other aspect. Like, the other things we said of, like, it has to be the last piece of a championship team. No, like, I have to have a top 10 at worst offensive line already for me to think it's going to pay off for me, because that's when it really does, in my opinion, like, having that elite level of running back is when it pays off, is when it takes you into that realm of unstoppable rushing game. So 18 Detroit, 23 Baltimore, and then that might be it of teams I'd actually be willing to pull the trigger on the first round.
Dallas? And
then 31 Philly. Dallas, no, because they're stuck with Zeke still, right? I mean, maybe they cut him, but they're stuck with that cap hit. And then I guess if you let Pollard walk too, maybe, but I don't know. I just think Dallas has other needs, and it's going to come to the offensive line too, where they did a good job of trying to rebuild it, but Tyron Smith, Jason Peters, obviously, they're old.
I think running back should be very clearly separated between the sort of what you would invest in free agency or second contracts and the draft. I think they tend to get lumped into the same conversation as don't invest in running backs at the end. But I actually think there's a much stronger argument for investing in running backs in the draft, even high, than there is investing a big money free agent contract in a running back. And so but I do think you get to a point in the first round, like the higher up you go, where it no longer makes sense, right? So Saquon, for example, I don't want a running back at number 2. Like, his contract is nuts for a running back. If he doesn't pan out, it's a problem. Plus, as you said, no offensive line. Like, it's just harder. And at number 2, the opportunity cost of what you could have had, behind door number 2 is probably a lot stronger.
Yes.
But let's Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, I think they both went the same position, 24.
20s, yeah.
Those guys, contract-wise, are not on a lot of money. Like, when you look where they stack up relative to other running backs in the NFL, that's a really reasonable deal. Yeah. And at the point where you're picking 24 or wherever in the 20s, you're probably not passing up on a blue-chip prospect to take that guy there. The contract isn't bad. And yet the talent at running back is arguably going to be the best guy in the draft, right? So I think that's the kind of sweet spot where it's actually, I don't have a problem with drafting a running back in the first round somewhere in, the lower half of the middle of the round and below. And last year, the first running back off the board was Breece Hall, right? And that was fine. Like, the Jets drafted Breece Hall with their 4th pick. They had 3 at that point?
Yeah, they had 3 in the first round.
4th pick. You're like, that's fine. His contract is a bargain. He might be the best running back available in this draft. That's a steal. Yeah. Embrace it.
No, I agree. And again, it's like, if the situation's in place. Like, if you are the Steelers, though, drafting Najee Harris and you're like, he's going to change our running game, you're just going to be sorely mistaken, right? You're just miscalculating how, or just misinterpreting how or what leads to rushing success at the NFL level. Putting the cart before the horse,
right?
Shall we say? So that's it's a twofold kind of problem in that. And I agree with you though that like at that range, I think people overestimate the hit rate of a lot of other positions, that you are really less than 50% of chance of getting a good NFL player there. Yeah. And that the safety and security are now like running back, just somewhat of an easier position to scout in the traits that it takes to succeed at the NFL level.
Right. So we can kind of broaden this from Bijan into this more general conversation about running backs being drafted. But that to me, the kind of mistake of putting the cart before the horse, that's just a process error rather than a fundamental, should you draft a running back at this position? The issue with Pittsburgh was exactly what everybody was saying at the time, which is if you are drafting this running back in the first round, believing it will fix your run game, you're out of your mind. Mm-hmm. That was the mistake, not drafting the running back in the first round at all. Like, I think that's entirely defensible. And, if you look at Pittsburgh, they're sort of the proof either way. Like it didn't fix their run game because they didn't fix the offensive line and the other parts of the offense that were causing the problems. But equally, if they ever do, A, Najee has already shown he's a good running back and can take advantage of that. And B, he's not on a lot of money. So if you ever actually get the rest of the stuff fixed, it's perfectly justifiable to take that guy in the first round. But I agree with you, you should do it in the right order. There's no point bringing the running back in if the situation isn't there for him to actually have any success.
Yes. And it's not like quarterback where it's like, oh, he can develop. It's like, you're just putting needless miles on those tires.
Running back is a weird position where their career is almost upside down. Like, it's the one position where a guy should be able to come in, hit the ground running immediately, and then arguably they're only going to get worse from that point on. I guess the only counter to that is they're probably going to get more sophisticated in the pass game, and in particular, from a blocking standpoint, the deeper into their career they get.
Yeah, I have no data to support this, but I think year 2, year 3 is the prime of an NFL running back. Yeah. That is the peak. Like, I think you have, year 1 of like learn the offense, everything's new, whatever, some hesitation, like maybe you don't hit the ground and be elite, but year 2, year 3, that's it. You're only getting worse from there usually.
And that's another reason I think why it is kind of justifiable to take these guys reasonably high in the draft, because you are targeting the guys that are, the superior prospects. You're only getting them probably for that first contract. If you have any sense, you're going to let them walk after that point, at which point there's value in that. There's value in getting that guy for the first contract, an elite talent, and hoping he doesn't get injured and then letting the guy cook.